Hello and welcome to Against All Odds, a program that is dedicated at showcasing survivor stories. And we all have different journeys in life, and some of us are always here to share our stories so that it can help the next person. On today's program on Against All Odds is someone who has survived being an alcoholic. Alcoholism is something that we don't really talk about, especially right here in Zimbabwe, because there are certain levels of drinking alcohol that have been normalized. But not only did he endanger himself with alcohol, it also got to a point where he started using different drugs. And we are going to explore a little bit more with Charles. Charles, thank you so much for joining us right here on Against All Odds. Definitely appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So let's talk to you and let's find out a little bit about yourself. Tell me about your upbringing. Where did you grow up? And how was it like, within your family? Did you have a great family setup? Or you were experiencing certain challenges in life?
I grew up in the most beautiful part of the country. Fortunately, I come from the Eastern Islands, in Inyanga. So that's where I grew up, in a kind of rural, peri-urban setting. And I'm the last in a family of 7, like the last.
So you're the last born?
I'm the last born. Like,
you're the 7th one?
Yeah, the one who came without people expecting.
Okay.
Kinda.
Okay.
Yeah. So but a great family. It's just unfortunate that, as I grew up, the majority of my siblings were all grown. And so I got to grow up mostly with my mom and my dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you are surviving being an alcoholic.
Yes.
Being addicted to alcohol. Let me start off by asking, when was your first taste of alcohol?
I don't really remember. Like, I cannot pinpoint. But I could say I was as young as 5.
As young as 5?
Yeah.
That's pretty young. And
yeah.
Why as young as 5? I mean, parents are supposed to be protecting children from alcohol. Was it because of the society that you were in the area?
Yeah, like I said, so it was kind of normal for, like, when adults are drinking. For then, you're a kid, you just go, you sit there, and then what up your cup, and then you start drinking. Or there would be ceremonies where there's drinking, and it was kind of like normal for kids to also indulge.
Okay.
Yeah, during my periods. All
right.
Yeah.
Wati kurei anti wakunyatsoziva kuti ichi chinhu chinonzi doro and doro rinodhaka.
Yeah.
Wakatanga kumwa wani makore mangani?
I would say maybe 13. 13, yeah, around 13.
Ipapo waita zvekubiridzira here kuti vabereki vako vasakubate here kana kuti wanga watotanga zvekutonyatsomwa chaizvo?
Zvazviri zvekubiridzira. Zvazvitori zvekubiridzira until like all the time, because my own family is something that was not expected of me. And yeah, it was always hide and seek. Okay. Because of better things were expected of me.
All right.
But yeah.
When did the hide and seek stop? When you're like, okay, maybe my parents cannot see me.
Yeah, so during vacations, you come from school, my holidays, I come from school, you're home. So from time to time.
Which school, which period of school are we talking about here?
Like say, the long holiday, Form 4 long holiday. That was the biggest one. But I made my results and all. Yeah, that was like I had all the time and all the time to experiment.
Okay.
Because we're not going to school. There was that excitement. They would up at the Form 4 and all that, and that's when I really started indulging more, in drinking more. Yeah.
All right. Okay. What would you drink? Would you? Is it? You were specific or chero chawangowana chirondamwa?
Ndikangoziva kuti mune alcohol. I'm sure they sanitizer yanga yavapota miwo ndaigona ndakatomborowa. So it was just anything that has alcohol in it, you want to it was experimenting.
Experiment with
all it. I just wanted to get to was the high, the feeling, the euphoria that came
that comes with alcohol.
Yeah.
Did your parents ever notice that even the long holiday at school kuti mwana wangu anenge akadhakwa kana kuti waizviwandisa?
I would try to hide it, but parents would eventually figure out.
And what would they say?
My mom was always upfront. She would ask, and then you always find a way to dodge around. this, that. And, you know, I was always just sneaky about it. But then people would know that I'm drinking, but I just, you know, I just didn't care.
Right.
I think, yeah.
So you went from Form 4, did you go through to Form 6?
I did.
All right. From Form 6, did you go to university?
I did.
All right. Let's talk about, you know, university.
Yeah.
Which you migrated, obviously, from Kumusha.
Yeah.
Wakuyaku town, I presume it's Harare. That's where your university.
I actually moved when I started my A-levels.
Okay.
And I went to a school in Mashingo.
Yeah.
That's when like the highlights of the story started there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when the experimenting even got worse when I was at school. You know, I would say the pressure of wanting to fit in.
Okay.
Would then lead to association with the cool kids in school. And then that would lead to us sneaking out of school, going to buy spirits, bringing them back, you know, indulging and all that. And yeah, that was when I think it started to pick up, such that my performance was actually low because of that.
So in school, your performance was actually affected by, you know, you experimenting with alcohol. You wanted to drink and wanted to feel that euphoria, that high.
I was actually kicked out of school for sneaking out to go for a certain musician's show when I was in Form 6, 2 weeks before writing my SIMSEC exams.
Charles, 2 weeks before writing your exams, you were kicked out of school.
I was kicked out of school. And yeah, that was that, you know, that's when, you know, when kind of like when you experiment with something and you get into a certain point, the next time you do it, it's no longer experimenting.
It's
you're now moving
on to something else.
You're now moving on to something, and it's usually something bigger than the last time,
Okay. Well, you can hear for yourself as we are talking to Charles. He's narrating his story. He said that the first time, most probably, he's not sure, he started tasting alcohol. Angana about 5 years, but I zita pane function iripo apa kwanga kuri kumusha kangono kapongo testao until azotanga kunyatsoita muskanzwa chaiwo wekuti anga akumboedza kutsvaka dora achiedza kudhakwa. Vabereki vakachimbomutsura achiti aiwa mama ina handina kudhakwa, but muskanzwa wakazonyatsotangwa pakumadoro paakazoti ndane freedom, because panga apa 6 angasisiri pamberi pevabereki anga kuona kuti he can actually get away with a lot. When we come back from the break, we want to talk about some of the effects of drinking alcohol and being an alcoholic, and how did he transition from taking alcohol to drugs. This is Against All Odds. Don't you go anywhere. Welcome back to Against All Odds. Now, we're just talking to Charles before the break, and he started narrating when he started experimenting with alcohol and how it actually got worse the older he got. Now, Charles, I'm now thinking, you know, you're growing up, you got expelled just before your exams in high school, but you still managed to pass so that you go to university. That means you must be very intelligent.
I am. I hope it's not bragging, but I'm definitely smart.
You're definitely smart.
And very intelligent,
All right. When you went to university, what did you study?
So I did an undergraduate degree in political science, and I went on to do a master's degree, Master of Science in International Relations. Yeah.
Now I'm imagining at university, this is where a lot happens.
Yeah.
You're meeting people from different walks of life. So we are how was it then, you know? Did the drinking escalate?
Yeah, so when I went to uni, actually the high school that I went to is like when I did my Form 1 to Form 4. That's when my life transitioned from being Munaga Kuriragumusha to being someone who had exposure, because I met quite a couple. I went to a good school. I met quite a couple of guys who were from the city and all that, you know, and those are the guys who had the top-notch info on how to get things going, you know. So when I then went to uni, after having gone to two different schools, I had quite, call it a large pool of friends from the school that I went to when I did my O-levels in the school that I went to when I did my A-levels. So it was quite a huge group of people. So at any given moment or at any given time, I had people to party with. I had people to drink with. I was never short of a crowd to vibe with, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're partying, you're vibing, you're having fun. Let's talk about, what would happen in these instances. When you were partying and when you were drinking, how much would you drink?
Oof. I think maybe you can deduce from what would happen at the end. So it usually ended with a blackout.
You'd black out from drinking?
Yeah.
Maimwechi?
Spirits mostly. Because when you go to uni and you're in part one, you don't really have money. So and then you go to the liquor store and you find the cheapest bottle, the one that fits the
budget,
the low budget. And so it was usually those low range spirits that would then indulge in. Yeah. Okay.
And you'd drink to the point of passing out?
Definitely. There could be like 5 of us who were passed out.
5?
Yeah. No, I actually think there are so many times when I kind of like call it what came near to where then get into instances where it was risky and lives could have been lost so many times.
Serious?
Because imagine you're at uni and there's a group of you and then there's one guy with a car. Then whenever when drinking starts, people want to do risky things. So sometimes we are driving around packed in a car. Sometimes we are going out at, in the morning. Sometimes we are staying up late, even during exam time. So yeah, it was always something was always happening.
When you say something was always happening, what was the lowest point that you experienced during that time when you other than passing out? Because I know passing out, consciousness.
Yeah, you wake up asking people. I once woke up in waterfalls, not knowing how I got there.
That
was kind of like
the norm.
Yeah, it was normal.
Any episodes of violence?
Definitely.
Yeah.
When you're going to the bar, when we'd go out, would go clubbing and all that, and you're meeting a lot of people, different people, and there's always going to be some violence. There was always going to be some violence that would then spark from those.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But naturally, I don't like violence, so you just get into it. But then I was always quick to get out before things got ugly.
All right.
Yeah.
And then when did you go from drinking to smoking cigarettes to mbanje as well?
Yeah.
Was that because papa ne peer pressure since turkumwa tudakuwedzera ka euphoria ka haika kambowedzera pamsore?
Definitely, that was always the point. The other thing is when you're drinking, and you're going out to drink, you're exposing yourself to the rest of the other things that are associated with drinking. So you start off with drinking alcohol, but that's a gateway to cigarettes. It always starts off as something cool. You're just chilling with the guys. Let's do my cigarettes, and then you start going into these other things. So you're drinking and someone comes and like, guys, I have this strand of weed, and then you get into it. So it's easier for you to get into other things when you have already started on one thing. So it started off with alcohol, got into these other things. Yeah. And
any other drugs that you tried out other than banji?
I did ecstasy. I hope it was ecstasy at one point.
You don't even know if it was ecstasy?
Yeah, not just once. So, someone would always come with something. And sometimes someone would just come and say, I have something, what do you want to try? And when you're drunk, you take risks that you would normally not take when you're sober. So that's like I was saying, it becomes a gateway to so many other things that happen within the environment where people are indulging in substances.
Why do you think you got to a point where you became dependent on alcohol? And when you became dependent on alcohol, would you drink every day?
So, what happens is it started off as drinking for fun. And then when I started, growing up and responsibilities started to come, I was not equipped enough to copy with life as it was changing and as I was growing and expectations were becoming more. I would say this is something that I got to realize later on after I'd gotten out. But then, yeah, if I was to explain it then, I would say I didn't know how to deal with life. And the most familiar thing for me was alcohol, because then I knew if I drink, I would forget what's happening. I knew if I drink, then I would get out of a situation where I'm sad or where I'm feeling low. So that was the familiar thing, the familiar go-to for any stressful situation that I would meet in life. So it ceased to be about peer pressure or just wanting to vibe or have fun. It became about always having a bottle close by for moments when you come home and you feel low, or for moments when the day is a bad day, you know. And that became like the normal thing to say. It's a familiar environment. Waking through things was not familiar.
But drinking alcohol, indulging in drugs and
was
smoking was the quickest way for you to forget the stressful things that you had.
Yeah.
Being a man, having to grow up, having to be an adult, having to have responsibilities. So I just want to look at the timeline, because you so how many years is it? Let's just say roughly, because for the years that you went through drinking until you came to a point of realization, good, I need to stop. How many years roughly?
So I'm talking about when I started in uni. That was when I was maybe 17 to, so say 10 years.
10 years in
last
total.
Year to last year. So maybe a decade.
A decade, 10 years. So it's a decade of getting drunk, passing out, misbehaving, using drugs and alcohol and cigarettes as a coping mechanism.
Yeah. But also in between there were periods where I would stop. So the longest that I went for on my own will was like 2 years. Without drinking within that decade.
10 years.
Yeah. And that was like I would be drinking knowing that I shouldn't be doing this, but then to know really how to work my way out of it,
you wouldn't know how to.
I wouldn't know how to. And the other thing was, as I grew up, I only got to realize that I was an addict when I went for rehabilitation.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, as you can hear Charles narrating his story, it only got worse in university, and he said it got to a point where it was no longer about partying and vibing, kungonakizwa nekumwadoro kungodhakwa chete, but zvakazosvika papoint yekuti ndakumwadoro, ndakuputa fodya, ndakumbeta zvembanje any other drugs that they came across, kuti ndite as a coping mechanism, kune stress yandine ndinayo. As an adult, how do I cope with this? I don't know how to deal with this, but the best way I can get rid of it now is by drinking and by indulging in different drugs. This is Against All Odds. When we come back from the break, we want to find out, how did Charles say, it's time for me to stop? It's time for me to go to rehab. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Against All Odds. As we're talking to Charles, we found out how he started drinking alcohol, how he started indulging in drugs and anything else that he came across just to get that high euphoria. Kungoti angonzwa kudhakwa. But ataura kuti aiwa ndakazosvika papoint hazvisi zvekudhakwa chete, hazvisi zvekungofara. Takusvika papoint yekuti it's now a coping mechanism. Ndoshandisa doro, ndoshandisa mbanje, ndoshandisa masigarettes kuti ndikwanise kubvisa stress yandinayo. Semurume kandakufunga kana tsikakwanisa kuwana solution kana kubuda mazviri ndodzokera mukumwadoro. Now Charles, it was last year, if I'm not mistaken, as you mentioned earlier, before the break.
27 November.
27 November.
Yeah.
What happened on 27 November that made you say, Shakwan?
So remember, like I said before, it was always sneaky. You're drinking. It's something that your family does not approve of. It's something that people who know you better does not approve of. And so remember those episodes I was talking about where we would get drunk in university and then things would get out of hand. Then they started happening now. And then, started affecting my relations with people, my family mostly. And so it got out of hand to the extent where they then suggested, do you want to go for rehabilitation? And the first time I said, no, I can deal with it. And then I tried and it didn't work. And the episodes started getting bigger and more, call it frequent, until one of them, my brother suggested, that we do rehabilitation, and I agreed to it. But just because people are saying let's do it, that was like the acceptance was just, I'd always wanted to do things that please my family.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was always the case. And that was why at first I agreed.
All right. So in your agreement to go to rehabilitation,
Ndaitofunga kuti it's going to be 1 week or 2 weeks.
Akaita weeks mangani kana mamanzi mangani uri mu rehabilitation?
I went for 6 months.
You went for 6 months in rehabilitation.
Yeah.
And in those 6 months when you were in rehab, how was it like with the withdrawal symptoms of not having alcohol and any other drugs and cigarettes?
Oh, so the first weekend was terrible. I went for 3 days having stomach cramps, throwing up, and just all those irritations that come with withdrawing from a substance. And I actually didn't know that alcohol was a drug when I went there.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was a drug. I also didn't know cigarettes were a drug. I also thought Banja was a herb. Like the common conception that it's a herb.
Yeah.
But during the time that I went there, the first 3 months were just, I would say the first 2 months were just me being in rehabilitation, like I'm here, and counting down on time, until I started to realize, So what they do to the rehabilitation that I went to, it's called Mbatrapangwe. Can I?
Yes,
say?
you can.
Yeah, so I went to Mbatrapangwe, sober living space. So it's a confined space where you get in and you don't get out.
Okay.
So you are in a Jurao's house. You're free to move around, but you cannot go out to associate with people. I don't have my cell phone. I don't have contact with anyone. I don't know what's happening outside. All I have is just time with myself. So in the first 2 months, it was just interacting with the other guys, finding out why they're in, when they're getting out. That was always the story there at first. Until I started to think more, they give you time to think. And one thing that really helped me was that they don't come to you and tell you how to get out of the space that you are. At least for me, that wasn't the case. I had to find out for myself through introspection, through just finding out. I got curious. I wanted to find out what it is that, because I was in this space that I didn't want to be in, and I didn't know how to get out of it. So I got curious. I wanted to find out what is it that makes a person stay in a place that they don't want to be in. So I started reading more. I would request books. I would request for, I had access to interviews that were done of other people who were recovering. I had access to videos of some of my favorite psychologists that I would just go through. And then I started discovering things that it was not really about the substances, really. It was the finer things that people don't usually mention. Because when people are talking about these things of substance abuse and all that, they're just usually on the surface.
On the surface, there's always something that is underlying.
Definitely. When we started talking to this point, we've just been discussing about substances I took, the events that happened, but what was really happening behind that is what I wanted to find out. So I started finding out about self-esteem. I started finding out about self-image. I started finding out about self-confidence. I started finding out about just the finer things of life, personalities, characters and all that, through reading books and having conversation with the psychologists and the professionals that were provided to me. And
all right.
I'm talking too much.
No, not at all. Charles, you are very intelligent.
Thank you.
You are such an intelligent young man. How old are you?
I'm 28 now. I'm turning 28.
You're turning 28.
Yeah.
Intelligent, well-spoken, and I'm glad you actually came to a self-realization of, the underlying issues that you were going through that made you say, enough is enough. You need to use, alcohol or substances for me to be able to, to feel some type of way about myself, or to have a certain character, or for people to notice me, or for me to feel value within myself.
Exactly.
Because these are some of the things that young men actually your age go through, and they don't know how to cope with it.
Definitely.
So what are your final words to someone out there who is going through the same thing?
So I just think, sit down with yourself and have an honest conversation with yourself. No one can get you out of this. When I was in rehab, there were people would say I went to 7 rehabilitations. So it's not really about where you are, it's about what you say to yourself, and just accept really that you have a problem, and then just be patient with yourself and work towards finding a solution, a personal one that doesn't involve anyone else. If you are lucky enough to have been given a platform like I did to go for, you know, like for rehabilitation or anything, like Batrapang, they also provide with counseling sessions. That's something that you can go to, you know, and just allow yourself to be vulnerable with yourself first. Ask yourself the hard questions and actually come to find out what it is that is driving you into getting into those places.
Great. Charles, continue on this bright journey and continue inspiring other youths out there and young men your age so that they can go on the right path.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much to Charles. He's an amazing young gentleman, and he told his story with all his heart, with all honesty. And I know that his journey is going to be an amazing one, because he's come to a self-realization of the underlying issues of why he was using substances and alcohol as a coping mechanism. This is Against All Odds. These are the stories that we wish to share with you so that you know that you yourself can be a survivor of anything. If you suffer from alcoholism, or if you're an alcoholic, or you use drugs or anything, remember it's possible to come out. My name is Rachel Mwenyeheli. Until next time, this is Against All Odds.